The morning arrived as quietly as the one before, but there was a heavy silence in the air, unlike anything I'd felt before. I woke to an empty space beside me, the bed colder than usual, and the light outside seemed to sneak past the curtains, as though it too was avoiding the tension that hung in the room. It had been a full day since Marissa had last spoken to me, and the silence felt deafening. I wasn't surprised. The days before had already begun to show signs of wear, with conversations cut short and looks that barely touched. But yesterday was different. She didn't even glance at me. I went through the motions of the day like a ghost, going about my routine, making breakfast, dropping the kids off at school, answering emails. But inside, my mind was in turmoil, a storm of confusion and bitterness. By evening, I realized that she had abandoned even the pretense of caring. She was out late again, no calls, no messages. The kids had asked about her, their innocent voices full of questions I couldn't answer honestly. She's busy, I told them. Busy. That word had become her shield, and it was my daily torment. Busy with work. Busy with meetings. Busy with friends. And like an idiot, I had swallowed it all without question. Until now. At midnight, when she still hadn't come home. Frustration started to boil over inside me. I paced the living room, while upstairs, the kids slept soundly, their faces peaceful in the dim glow of their nightlights. But my mind was in chaos, memories clashing with suspicions. Had it always been like this? The secretive texts. The sudden work trips. The laughter during her phone calls when I was in the other room. Had I truly been this blind? The door creaked open just past 1 a.m., and she walked in, her heels clicking sharply on the floor. Her face was unreadable, and her dress clung to her body like a symbol of betrayal. She didn't even acknowledge me. "Where were you?" I asked, my voice calm, though my heart was racing. She didn't answer. Instead, she removed her shoes and disappeared into the bedroom, leaving me alone in the silence she'd mastered. That was the moment I realized. This wasn't just neglect. This wasn't simply distance. This was deliberate, calculated cruelty, aimed straight at the heart of everything we were supposed to be. A husband. A wife. A family. By morning, I had made up my mind. I packed a bag for myself and one for the kids, taking only what we would need for the next few days. The rest could wait. I wrote a note and left it on the kitchen counter, the words sharp and to the point. "Marissa, the kids and I are gone. Don't call. Don't text. Don't try to find us. You'll understand why soon enough." At first, it wasn't about revenge. It was about survival. But as the sun began to rise and the road stretched out ahead of us, something inside me changed. This wasn't just about leaving anymore. It was about what would come next. The seeds of revenge had been planted. The kids sat quietly in the back seat. Their small backpacks hugged their bodies as we drove through the quiet of the early morning. Frank, my 9-year-old, kept his eyes fixed on the horizon, a furrow on his brow that reminded me too much of myself. Clara, only 6, was sleepy, her head resting against the window, her curls catching the soft light. "Where are we going, Dad?" Frank asked, his voice steady but soft. "A little trip," I answered. "Just us, somewhere quiet." He didn't ask why. That's the thing about kids. They notice everything, but sometimes they choose silence over the burden of adult explanations. For now, that was enough. Our first stop was a small cabin, tucked away in the woods outside of town. It belonged to Joseph, an old college friend of mine who traveled a lot and always said we could use it whenever we needed to. I never imagined I'd take him up on it, but life has a way of changing things. The cabin was simple but solid, surrounded by tall pines and the kind of silence that presses against you. I carried the kids' bags inside, leading them up to the loft where they would sleep. Clara's face lit up at the sight of the cozy space, but Frank stayed near the doorway, his eyes locked on me, searching for something he wasn't ready to understand. "You okay, Dad?" he asked, once Clara had climbed up to the loft. I knelt in front of him, resting a hand on his shoulder. "I will be, buddy. I promise." It was the truth, or at least a version of it. As much as I wanted to shield them from the mess I was drowning in, I knew I couldn't let it all unravel in silence. The kids deserved a father who could protect them, and to do that, I had to get clarity. And to gain clarity, I would have to face the shards of betrayal Marissa had left behind. Once the kids were settled, I walked down the narrow trail behind the cabin, my phone clenched tightly in my hand. I hadn't checked it since we left, not even the growing pile of notifications on the lock screen. I knew her messages would be there, her calls, but I wasn't ready to open them. Not yet. Instead, I focused on what came next. My instincts screamed for answers, for action. If she thought my silence meant surrender, she had no idea who she was dealing with. I called Joseph first, explaining briefly that I'd taken him up on his offer and might need the cabin for a few weeks. He didn't ask why. He knew better than that. "Stay as long as you need, man," he said. "You okay?" "I will be," I replied, the words starting to feel like a mantra. Next, I called a private investigator, Richard Andrews. I'd found his name months ago when my suspicions started to grow. Richard was known for getting the truth, no matter how deep it was buried. "Mr. Reed?" he answered, his voice low and professional. "I need everything," I said, my voice cold and hard. "Phone records, emails, bank statements. I want to know where she's been, who she's been with, and for how long." He didn't ask any questions. He didn't need to. "Consider it done," he said. "I'll get started today. Expect an update within 48 hours. When the call ended, I stared at my phone, my thumb hovering over Marissa's messages. Finally, I opened the thread. There were 6 missed calls, spaced throughout the morning, and a string of texts that shifted from worry to anger. "Where are you? This isn't funny, Lucas. Call me. You need to bring the kids back now. Don't make me do something drastic." The last message hit hardest. Desperation, raw and exposed, leaked through her words. She wasn't concerned about us. She was terrified about what would come to light, what she was about to lose. Back at the cabin, the kids were playing cards at the small wooden table by the window. Their laughter filled the air, a fragile bomb against the ache in my chest. Clara giggled, teasing Frank for losing. For a brief moment, it almost felt like things were normal. But normal had become a distant memory. The path ahead was anything but ordinary. Later that night, after the kids had drifted off to sleep, I sat at the kitchen table, the glow from my laptop screen casting shadows across the room. I opened the file I'd started months ago when the first doubts began to creep in. It was a cold catalog of suspicion. Receipts for late-night dinners, hotel bookings she'd never mentioned, credit card charges at places that didn't add up. The picture wasn't fully clear yet, but it was damning enough to confirm what I had feared for weeks. This wasn't simple neglect. This was deliberate, cold, calculated cruelty. The silence she had imposed on me the day before had been her final mistake. She thought I'd sit back, waiting, lost in confusion and self-doubt. Instead, I was putting something far more dangerous into motion. The first morning in the cabin was peaceful, quiet. The kids slept in, their exhaustion finally catching up with them. I stood on the porch, sipping my black coffee as the sun rose. My mind raced, replaying every moment, every clue I had missed or made excuses for. Marissa's distance hadn't started just yesterday. It had been building for months, maybe even years. It had crept in, slowly and quietly, like a thief in the night, stealing our shared moments, the laughter, the glances, the intimacy we once had. But it wasn't just about the distance. It was the lies she had hidden behind her smile, the betrayals that I could now feel in every breath she took near me. By the time the kids woke up, I had showered and prepared breakfast. Clara wandered into the kitchen, rubbing her eyes, her wild curls still tangled from sleep. She climbed into the chair next to mine and reached for a piece of toast. "Is Mom coming later?" she asked, her voice small but steady. I paused, choosing my words carefully. "Not today, sweetie," I replied. She nodded, accepting the answer as children do, though her eyes lingered on me, searching for something I wasn't sure I could give her. Reassurance? Clarity? I wasn't sure I had either of those for myself. By mid-morning, my phone buzzed. It was Richard Andrews, the investigator I had hired, calling with his first update. "I've got some preliminary findings," he said, his voice neutral. "Your wife's phone records show regular contact with one number over the past 6 months. Calls, texts, late-night messages. It's all there." "Who does the number belong to?" I asked, dreading the answer. "A man named Logan Gibbs. Local businessman, married with 2 kids. Lives about 10 minutes from your house." The name hit me like a punch to the gut. Logan wasn't just a stranger. He was someone I knew. Someone we knew. He coached Frank's soccer team. His wife volunteered at the school, and we'd even had them over for dinner. The betrayal deepened. "Do you want me to dig into him further?" Richard asked. "Absolutely," I said, my jaw tightening. "I want everything. His schedule, his finances, his connections. If he so much as sneezed near her, I want to know about it." "Understood. I'll call you with more in 48 hours. When the call ended, the weight of the revelation settled over me. It wasn't just about Marissa anymore. This was a conspiracy built on false friendship and betrayal. Logan had been in my house, sharing meals with us, all while stabbing me in the back. That afternoon, I took the kids on a walk through the woods. Their laughter echoed through the trees as they chased each other up and down the trail. It was a temporary escape, a reminder of what truly mattered. We reached a clearing where sunlight streamed through the trees, and the kids plopped down on a patch of grass. I sat with them, leaning back against a tree, allowing the stillness of the moment to seep into me. Frank broke the silence. "Dad, is everything okay with Mom?" The question hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Clara looked at me too, her wide eyes full of the same unspoken questions. They were young, but they weren't unaware. "I don't know, buddy," I said honestly, "but I promise you this. No matter what happens, I'll always be here for you." Frank nodded, his lips pressed tightly together. Clara crawled into my lap, wrapping her little arms around my neck. "We're here for you too, Daddy." Their words, so simple and pure, steadied me. Whatever I uncovered, whatever came next, I wasn't just fighting for myself. I was fighting for them, for their security, their innocence, and the trust they still had in me. That night, after the kids fell asleep, I returned to my laptop. I opened the digital file I had started compiling, now filled with screenshots of credit card statements, time-stamped photos from Richard's preliminary report, and emails I had retrieved from Marissa's personal account. One email stood out, a short message from Logan, sent 2 weeks ago. "Last night was perfect. Can't wait until next time." The words burned through me like acid on my skin. I read it again, then a third time. Finally, I forwarded it to Richard, asking him to cross-reference it with the call logs and add it to the growing pile of evidence. But something about it nagged at me. Marissa wasn't careless. For all her deception, she had always been meticulous. This email felt too obvious. Either she was slipping, or she never thought I'd look. Both possibilities infuriated me. I closed the laptop, my fist clenched tight at my sides. The anger surged again, cold and calculating, but I couldn't let it consume me. Not yet. There was too much at stake. I sat alone in the darkened cabin, the only light coming from the faint glow of the moon outside. My mind churned with plans, each one colder than the last. Marissa and Logan thought they had gotten away with it. They thought I'd stay blind, too trusting to see the truth. They were wrong. This wasn't just about leaving anymore. This was about justice, about showing them the weight of their betrayal. Most of all, it was about making them understand that their actions would have consequences. Marissa had ignored me for a day, but when she realized what I had done, what I was planning, she'd understand that my silence was never surrender. It was strategy. The second day at the cabin felt different. The kids seemed to adjust to our new routine, their laughter filling the space as they played games and explored the woods. But beneath it all, the tension I carried felt sharper than ever. I knew I couldn't stay still for long. There was more to uncover, plans to set in motion. After breakfast, I stepped outside to take a call from Richard Andrews. His tone, clipped and efficient as always, told me he had found something substantial. "I dug into Logan Gibbs," he began. "The guy's been covering his tracks, but not well enough. His bank statements show regular withdrawals from an account he shares with his wife, all cash, all unaccounted for. And there are charges at a private club downtown. The Monarch. You familiar with it?" I knew the name. The Monarch was a high-end, exclusive venue for the city's wealthiest, and its most indiscreet. "He's been a regular there for the past year," Richard continued. "And your wife?" "She's been there too." The confirmation hit harder than I expected, even though I had already suspected it. The Monarch wasn't a place people just went for dinner and cocktails. It was a place where people indulged in their darkest desires, protected by secrecy and status. "Anything else?" I asked, keeping my voice even. "There's more," Richard replied. "I pulled security footage from a parking lot near the Monarch. 2 nights ago, your wife and Gibbs were there together. I've got timestamps and clear images. I'm sending them to you now." Seconds later, my phone buzzed with a message. I opened it to find photos of Marissa and Logan walking side by side. Their heads were close, their bodies angled in a way that left no question about they were sharing in that moment, thinking no one was watching. The photos told a story, but they weren't enough. Not yet. I needed something irrefutable. "Keep digging," I told Richard. "I want every detail." "Understood," he replied. "One more thing, you might want to brace yourself for this. Gibbs's wife has been suspicious for a while. She hired her own PI months ago, and she's willing to share what she's found." The news hit me hard. Logan's wife had been living in this same nightmare, dealing with the same suspicions, the same pain. The idea of confronting her felt daunting, but necessary. "Set up a meeting," I said. "The sooner, the better." The kids and I spent the afternoon fishing at a small lake near the cabin. It was a simple, quiet time, one I hadn't realized I was missing until now. Frank caught a small perch, his face lighting up as he held it up for Clara to see. She squealed, half excited, half disgusted, and the sound made me laugh for the first time in days. For a few hours, I allowed myself to live in the moment, to be the father they deserved, without the shadow of Marissa's betrayal hanging over us. But as the sun dipped lower in the sky, reality returned. That evening, Richard texted me an address for the meeting with Logan's wife, Emma. We agreed to meet at a small coffee shop on the outskirts of town, far enough from the city to avoid any chance of being seen. I told the kids I'd be back in a couple of hours, and left them watching a movie in the cabin's small living room. When I arrived, Emma was already there, seated at a corner table. She was younger than I expected, her blonde hair pulled back into a tight ponytail. Her face was drawn, but determined. She stood as I approached, a mixture of relief and apprehension in her eyes. "Lucas," she asked, extending her hand. I nodded, shaking her hand briefly before sitting down across from her. For a moment, neither of us spoke. There was a shared understanding between us, a pain that didn't need to be explained. "I don't know where to start," she said finally, her voice trembling slightly. "I've known for months, but I didn't know how to confront him. I thought maybe I was imagining it, but the things I found." Her voice broke, and she reached into her bag, pulling out a manila envelope. She slid it across the table to me, her hands shaking. "These are copies of everything my PI uncovered," she said. "Emails, photos, financial records." I thought I could ignore it, but I can't anymore. I opened the envelope and flipped through the contents. Each piece of evidence felt like another nail in the coffin of my marriage. Photos of Logan and Marissa at hotels, receipts for expensive gifts he had bought her, and messages that left no doubt about the nature of their relationship. "This is thorough," I said, my voice low. "But why are you sharing this with me?" She looked down at her hands, twisting the strap of her bag nervously. "Because I can't do this alone anymore, and because you deserve to know the truth." Her words hit me hard. For months, I had felt isolated, drowning in my suspicions, but now, here was someone who had been walking the same path, carrying the same burden. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, "for what they've done to both of us." I nodded, unable to find the words to respond. When I returned to the cabin, the kids were asleep. Their small bodies were curled up under the thick blankets of the loft, their breathing soft and peaceful. I stood there for a moment, looking at them. The anger and pain that had been building inside me now felt like a weight that had no place. They were still innocent, still untouched by the cruelty of the world. And no matter what came next, I would protect them. I sat alone in the living room, the envelope from Emma spread out on the table before me. The evidence was damning, more than enough to confirm what I already knew. But it still wasn't enough to stop them. Not yet. Marissa and Logan thought they could play me for a fool, that I would quietly accept their betrayal and just move on. They had no idea who they were dealing with. They wanted to build their new life on the ashes of mine, but I wasn't done yet. I was just getting started. The cabin felt quieter the next morning, the kind of stillness that settles just before a storm. The kids were up early, their energy a bright contrast to the dark thoughts swirling in my mind. I made pancakes for breakfast, sitting with them at the small wooden table as they chattered about the adventures they'd planned for the day. I smiled, nodded, and answered when needed, but my mind was elsewhere. I was thinking about the evidence Emma had given me, about the threads of betrayal tightening around Marissa and Logan, and about what needed to happen next. After breakfast, I called Richard Andrews. His voice was sharp and businesslike as he picked up on the first ring. "I've reviewed what Logan's wife gave us," he said before I could speak. "It's solid, but there's a twist." "What kind of twist?" I asked, bracing myself for whatever was coming. "Your wife and Logan have been planning something bigger than just running around behind your back. There are financial transactions between them, large sums moving into a shared offshore account. It's recent, just a few weeks old." My stomach tightened. What are they planning? That's the question, but the timing is suspicious. It lines up with a property purchase in a nearby town, a house registered under a shell corporation. I'm still digging, but it's clear they're preparing for something permanent. Permanent. The word landed like a punch to my chest. This wasn't just an affair. They were building a new life. A life they'd been secretly constructing while I was busy holding our family together. "Keep digging," I said, my voice low and firm. "I need everything." "There's more," Richard continued. "I've traced some of Marissa's phone activity." "Go on." "She's been in contact with a divorce attorney several times over the past month." I should have seen it coming, but hearing it confirmed still hit hard. She was planning to leave me, take the kids, and walk away from everything we'd built. She thought I wouldn't notice, but she didn't know me at all. That afternoon, I took the kids to a nearby lake. They splashed in the shallows while I sat on the shore, my phone in hand. It was time to act. I called a lawyer, someone I'd worked with in the past. Evelyn Fisher, a sharp, no-nonsense woman who specialized in high-conflict divorces. Her reputation for dismantling opposition was legendary. "Lucas," she said when she picked up, "what can I do for you?" "I need your help," I said. "My wife is having an affair, and she's planning to take the kids." There was a pause. Then her voice hardened. "I assume you have evidence." "More than enough," I replied. "Photos, financial records, phone logs, and I have an investigator working on more." "Good. The first step is securing custody. Judges don't like it when one parent takes the kids without consulting the other. The fact that you've already removed them puts you in a strong position, assuming you can prove the affair and her intentions." "I can," I said firmly. "Then we'll build the case," she said. "I'll send you a list of documents I'll need. We'll start the filings immediately." "Thank you," I said. "Lucas," she added, her voice softer now. "I've handled cases like this before. It's going to get messy. Be ready for that." "I am," I replied, my voice steady. That evening, I started putting the pieces into place. The cabin's modest Wi-Fi wasn't fast, but it was enough for what I needed. I sent Evelyn the files Emma had given me, along with the evidence Richard had uncovered so far. Then I started drafting an email to Marissa. The message was simple, just enough to let her know I wasn't playing her game anymore. "Marissa, I know. I didn't send it yet. Timing was everything, and I wasn't ready to tip my hand. Not until I was certain every piece of this puzzle was in place." The next morning, Richard called with another update. "Your wife and Logan have scheduled a meeting with their attorney," he said. "It's happening tomorrow afternoon, downtown. I've already arranged for someone to record it," he added. "Good," I said. "Let me know what comes of it." "There's something else," Richard continued. "I dug deeper into that property they bought. It's not just a house. It's a family home," he said. "Big enough for the kids." The implications were clear. Marissa wasn't just planning to leave. She was planning to take the kids and move them into this new life with Logan, as if I didn't exist. As if I'd just roll over and let it happen. But I wasn't about to let that happen. Not now. Not ever. That night, after the kids were asleep, I sat at the table with my laptop, drafting my next move. The anger I had felt before had cooled into something sharper, more focused. I was no longer just reacting. I was taking control. I wasn't going to let them tear apart the life I had built. More focused. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about justice. I drafted letters to a few trusted friends, people who knew me well enough to believe my side when everything came to light. I outlined the facts, attached the evidence, and sealed the envelopes. If Marissa thought she could turn the narrative against me, she was sorely mistaken. The final step was contacting Richard one last time. "I want a live feed from their meeting tomorrow," I told him. "I want to hear everything." "Consider it done," he replied. As I hung up the phone, I felt the first glimmer of control return. Marissa and Logan thought they could destroy my life without consequences. They thought they could build their perfect little world on the ashes of my family. But they underestimated me. They underestimated what I was willing to do to protect what mattered most. The next morning passed in a blur of preparation. I busied myself with the kids, taking them on a hike through the woods and letting them splash in the creek near the cabin. Their laughter echoed through the trees, momentarily lifting the heavy weight in my chest. But the reprieve was brief. By the time we returned to the cabin, my phone buzzed with a text from Richard Andrews. "Feed is live. Check your link." I ushered the kids into the living room, setting them up with a board game before retreating to the small bedroom I had claimed as my workspace. My laptop was already open, the secure link waiting in my inbox. I clicked it, my pulse quickening as the video feed loaded. The screen flickered to life, showing a small, well-appointed conference room. Marissa sat at the table, her posture rigid but her face composed. Across from her sat Logan Gibbs, his expression calm but with a hint of nervous energy in the way he fidgeted with his pen. Between them sat a man I assumed was their attorney. "Let's get started," the attorney said, his voice steady. "This agreement will establish custody arrangements, property division, and financial obligations in anticipation of the divorce filing." Marissa nodded, her voice firm. "I want primary custody of the kids. Logan and I agree it's what's best for them." The words made my stomach churn. She spoke so casually, as if this betrayal wasn't tearing our family apart. As if she hadn't already decided to replace me in my children's lives without a second thought. Lucas will contest that, Logan said, his tone low. He's stubborn, but we've anticipated that. Oh, I'm sure you have, I muttered under my breath, my fingers gripping the edge of the desk. The attorney adjusted his glasses. If you're confident this is the arrangement you want, I'll move forward with the filings. But I need to warn you. If Mr. Reed has any evidence of infidelity or premeditated custody interference, it could complicate things. Marissa's jaw tightened. He doesn't know anything. And even if he suspects, he won't be able to prove it. I leaned back in my chair, a grim smile tugging at my lips. She had no idea just how much I already knew. The meeting dragged on for over an hour, with discussions about finances, custody schedules, and property settlements filling the time. But the real bombshell came near the end. Logan leaned forward, his voice dropping. We need to finalize the timeline for moving into the new house. Once Marissa has the kids full-time, we'll need to be settled. Agreed, Marissa said. I'll handle the move discreetly. Lucas won't know until it's too late. The rage simmered beneath my calm exterior, but I forced myself to stay focused. This was what I needed, a clear admission of their intent to take the kids, to uproot our lives without so much as a warning. As the meeting ended, I closed the laptop, my mind already racing with the next steps. I had everything I needed now. It was time to act. That evening, I called Evelyn Fisher, the lawyer I'd hired. Her response was swift and precise. This is exactly what we needed, she said after I sent her the recording. The evidence of collusion and intent to interfere with custody will make a strong case in court. How soon can we file? I asked. Immediately, she replied. I'll draft the emergency custody petition tonight. Given the evidence, we should have no trouble securing a temporary order to keep the kids with you. Do it, I said. And make sure they know we're not playing games. I'll handle it, she said firmly. But Lucas, prepare yourself. This is going to get ugly. As the night deepened, I returned to the living room where the kids were dozing on the couch, their game forgotten. I gently lifted Clara, carrying her to the loft and tucking her under the covers. Frank stirred as I returned for him, his eyes fluttering open. Dad, he mumbled sleepily. Is everything okay? I ruffled his hair, forcing a smile. It will be, buddy. I promise. As I watched them sleep, the weight of the day pressed down on me. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about them, their safety, their happiness, their future. Marissa and Logan had made their choices, but they wouldn't get to destroy what mattered most. Before I turned in for the night, I sent one last message to Marissa. Short, pointed, and deliberate. Marissa, I know everything. Don't think for a second I'll let you win. Lucas. I stared at the screen after hitting send, imagining her reaction as the words hit her. The betrayal she had tried to bury was now exposed. The game she thought she was winning now flipped on its head. Tomorrow, everything would change. The message was sent, and there was no turning back. I barely slept that night, my thoughts racing with everything that had to be done. The kids were still sound asleep in the loft when my phone buzzed early the next morning. I grabbed it quickly, stepping onto the porch so I wouldn't wake them. It was Marissa. Her name on the screen felt like a slap, a reminder of all that had been shattered. I let it ring once, twice, before answering. Lucas, she said, her voice tight with a mix of anger and fear. What the hell is this? You know exactly what it is. I replied, my voice calm but firm. You've taken the kids and disappeared. Do you have any idea how insane that is? I know about you and Logan, I said, cutting her off. I know about the house, the money, the lawyer. I know everything, Marissa. So don't stand there pretending to be the victim. There was a long silence on the line, the weight of her guilt pressing through the receiver. Finally, she spoke, her tone defensive. This isn't what you think. You don't understand. Don't lie to me. I snapped, my voice rising for the first time. I've seen the emails, the photos. I've heard the recordings. You weren't planning to just leave me, Marissa. You were going to take everything, our kids, our life, and walk away like I didn't exist. Her breath hitched, but she recovered quickly. I did what I had to do. You were always so focused on your work, so distant. I didn't feel seen anymore. Don't you dare put this on me, I said, my voice cold. You made your choices. Now you'll deal with the consequences. I'm their mother, Lucas, she said, her tone sharpening. You can't just take them from me. I'm not taking them from you, I said evenly. But I'll fight like hell to make sure they're protected. You've shown me exactly who you are, Marissa. and I won't let you drag them into your mess." Before she could respond, I ended the call, my hand trembling as I set the phone down. The anger that had simmered beneath the surface now burned like a fire, propelling me forward. There was no room for doubt anymore. The battle lines had been drawn. By mid-morning, Evelyn Fisher called with an update. "The emergency custody petition has been filed," she said. "Given the evidence, I'm confident the judge will grant it." "How soon will we know?" I asked. "Within the next 24 to 48 hours, she replied. "Until then, I'd advise staying put. Keep the kids safe and out of sight. Marissa may try to escalate this." "She already has," I said grimly. "She called this morning, trying to spin the story." "Don't engage with her directly," Evelyn warned. "Let me handle any communication going forward. Anything you say can and will be used against you." "I understand," I said, though the thought of staying silent while Marissa twisted the narrative made my blood boil. The rest of the day passed in slow, tense hours. I kept the kids busy, taking them fishing again and teaching them how to skip stones across the lake. They laughed and played, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing just beyond the trees. Watching them, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. This fight wasn't just about justice. It was about giving them the stability they deserved. That evening, as I cooked dinner, my phone buzzed again. This time it was Richard. "I've got something for you," he said. "Marissa and Logan met again this afternoon," he continued. "The attorney wasn't there this time. It was just the two of them." "What did they say?" I asked, gripping the phone tightly. "I'll send you the full recording, but the short version is that they're panicking. Your message to Marissa rattled her, and Logan's starting to second-guess their plan." "Good," I said, a grim smile spreading across my face. "Let them sweat." "There's one more thing," Richard added. "Logan's wife, Emma, reached out again. She's willing to testify if it comes to that. She wants to make sure Logan pays for what he's done," Richard said. "Tell her I appreciate it," I said, "and make sure she has everything she needs to stay safe." That night, after the kids were asleep, I sat on the porch with a whiskey in hand, staring out at the darkened woods. My mind was clearer now, the path forward illuminated by everything I'd uncovered. Marissa and Logan thought they could break me, that they could rewrite our story and leave me behind. But they underestimated the strength of a father fighting for his children. The stakes were high, and the road ahead would be rough. But as I sat there, the cool night air washing over me, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Hope. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming what mattered. About standing tall in the face of betrayal and showing my kids that their father wasn't just a man to be pushed aside. I wasn't done yet. The morning after my conversation with Marissa, my phone buzzed with a notification from Evelyn Fisher. I'd been bracing for this moment, my mind racing with both dread and determination. "The judge has granted the emergency custody order," Evelyn said when I called her back. "For now, the kids will remain with you until the court can review the full case." Relief washed over me, but it was tempered by the knowledge that this was only the beginning. "What happens next?" I asked. "We filed a formal custody petition," Evelyn explained. "This will set the stage for the final hearing. In the meantime, Marissa will be notified of the order, and her access to the children will be restricted. Be prepared for her to fight back." "She's not getting near them," I said firmly. Evelyn's voice softened. "Lucas, you've taken the first step. Stay focused. We'll handle this one move at a time." Later that day, Richard Andrews sent me a new recording from Marissa and Logan's most recent meeting. I played it in the solitude of the cabin's small bedroom, headphones on to avoid disturbing the kids. In the recording, Marissa's voice was tight with frustration. "He's not backing down, Logan," she said. "He's got a lawyer, and he's filed for emergency custody." "I told you this wouldn't be easy," Logan replied, his tone clipped. "We underestimated him." "You think?" Marissa shot back. "We need to figure this out. If he wins custody, it's over. We'll lose everything." There was a pause before Logan spoke again, his voice laced with uncertainty. "Maybe we should rethink this. If he has evidence, and you know he does, he could drag us through the mud. This might not be worth it." Marissa's response was immediate, her voice low and venomous. "It's worth it. I'm not going back to that life, Logan. We just need to stay ahead of him." "Let me handle it," she finished, her tone icy. The recording ended, and I sat back, my hands trembling. Their desperation was palpable, but so was their resolve. Marissa wasn't going to back down without a fight. That evening, I received another call from Evelyn. Marissa has been served with the custody order, she said. And, as expected, she's filed a response. What's her claim? I asked, my jaw tightening. She's claiming you're an unfit parent, citing your decision to leave the home without notice. She's the one who's unfit, I said, my anger boiling over. She's the one who's been lying, cheating, and scheming. I know, Evelyn said calmly. And we'll prove that. But be prepared. She'll throw everything she has at you. Stay steady. Don't engage directly. Let me handle the legal side. Her words were reassuring, but the weight of the situation still pressed heavily on me. This wasn't just a legal battle. It was a war for my children's future. The next few days were a blur of preparation. Evelyn worked tirelessly, compiling the evidence Richard had uncovered, along with Emma's testimony. Meanwhile, I focused on the kids, doing everything I could to shield them from the chaos. One evening, as I was tucking Clara into bed, she looked up at me with wide, curious eyes. Daddy, is Mommy mad at us? The question hit like a dagger. I sat on the edge of the bed, taking her small hand in mine. No, sweetheart, I said softly. Mommy loves you very much. We're just trying to figure some things out right now. Like what? She asked, her voice filled with innocent curiosity. Like how to make sure you and Frank are happy and safe, I replied, forcing a smile. That's the most important thing. She seemed satisfied with that answer, curling up under the covers and closing her eyes. But as I watched her drift off to sleep, the weight of the situation felt heavier than ever. I couldn't let her down. I wouldn't. The morning of the first custody hearing arrived faster than I expected. I left the kids with a trusted neighbor who lived near the cabin, someone Joseph had vouched for, and drove to the courthouse alone. The drive was tense, the silence in the car amplifying the thoughts racing through my mind. When I arrived, Evelyn was waiting for me in the lobby. Her presence was a steadying force, her sharp eyes scanning the room with the precision of someone who thrived in the chaos of legal battles. Marissa's already here, she said, nodding toward a bench on the far side of the room. I followed her gaze and saw Marissa sitting next to Logan, her face a mask of composure. But her eyes betrayed her. They were darting around, her nerves evident in the tightness of her jaw. Evelyn led me into the courtroom, where we took our seats. The judge entered, and the proceedings began. Marissa's attorney painted a picture of me as unstable, accusing me of impulsively taking the kids and creating an unsafe environment. But when Evelyn presented the evidence, the recordings, the financial transactions, the timeline of her betrayal, the tide began to turn. The judge listened intently, asking pointed questions that Marissa struggled to answer. By the end of the hearing, it was clear the court wasn't buying her version of events. When the judge ruled to uphold the emergency custody order, I felt a wave of relief crash over me. But it was tempered by the knowledge that this was only the first step. The final custody decision was still months away, and Marissa would undoubtedly fight tooth and nail to regain control. As I left the courthouse, Marissa caught up to me in the parking lot, her face flushed with anger. You think you've won? She spat. This isn't over, Lucas. I turned to face her, my expression calm but resolute. You're right, Marissa. It's not over. But I promise you this. I'll do whatever it takes to protect our kids from you and Logan. Whatever it takes. Her eyes narrowed. This wasn't just about winning a court case. It was about proving that the truth mattered, that love and loyalty weren't just words to be discarded. Marissa and Logan had tried to tear my life apart. But piece by piece, I was taking it back. The courthouse victory felt like a small but crucial win, a foothold on the steep climb ahead. Yet, as I drove back to the cabin, the weight of what lay ahead pressed heavily on my chest. Marissa wasn't going to retreat quietly. Her parting words, seething, venomous, echoed in my mind. I arrived to find the kids playing in the yard with their sitter, their laughter a soothing balm to my frayed nerves. As I stepped out of the car, Frank ran to me, his face lighting up. Did you win, Dad? He asked. I crouched down, meeting his eager eyes. We did, buddy, I said, ruffling his hair. We're staying together for now. But it's just the beginning. He nodded solemnly, as if he understood more than he let on. Good. I don't want to go back, he added, his words hitting harder than I expected. The simple truth carried a weight I hadn't realized he was bearing. I pulled him into a hug, vowing silently that I wouldn't let him down. That evening, as the kids watched a movie, my phone buzzed with a call from Richard Andrews. I stepped onto the porch, answering quickly. Lucas, things are heating up, he said, his voice edged with urgency. Marissa and Logan are scrambling. Logan's wife, Emma, just called me. She overheard them talking about pushing back against you. They're getting desperate. What does that mean? I asked, my grip tightening on the phone. They're looking for leverage. anything they can use to discredit you. Emma thinks Logan might try to dig into your finances, your work history, anything to make you look unstable. I let out a slow breath, forcing myself to stay calm. Let them dig. I've got nothing to hide. Still, Richard said, be cautious. Desperate people do reckless things. Thanks for the heads up, I said. Keep me posted. The next morning, Evelyn called with an update. Marissa's attorney has filed for an expedited hearing, she said. They're claiming the kid's living situation with you is inadequate and that the court needs to intervene immediately. That's ridiculous, I said, pacing the porch. The cabin is perfectly fine, and the kids are thriving here. I agree, Evelyn said, her tone steady, but we need to be prepared. This is a classic tactic. Throw mud at the wall and hope some of it sticks. Do you have documentation of the living conditions? She asked. Photos? Anything. I'll get it, I replied, trying to think of everything I needed to do. What else? Make sure your finances are in order, she said. If they try to paint you as financially unstable, we'll need to counter it with proof. And keep documenting everything, conversations, interactions with Marissa, anything that could help. I'm on it, I said, determined to stay ahead of them. That afternoon, I set to work gathering evidence. I photographed the cabin, the kids' cozy loft, the meals I cooked for them. I saved receipts, logged expenses, and made sure every detail was accounted for. In the quiet moments, I felt the weight of their eyes on me. Frank's cautious curiosity, Clara's quiet trust. They didn't understand the full extent of what was happening, but they sensed the stakes, and I couldn't let them down. By evening, I received another call from Richard. His voice was sharp, urgent. Lucas, I've got bad news, he said. What's happened? I asked, already bracing for the worst. Marissa's made a move. She's filed a formal complaint with Child Protective Services, claiming the cabin is unsafe and that you're isolating the kids. The words hit like a blow, my stomach twisting. What does that mean for us? I asked, forcing my voice to remain steady. It means they'll send someone to investigate, Richard said. Probably within the next few days. They'll want to interview the kids, inspect the living conditions. If Marissa's complaint is unfounded, it won't go anywhere, Richard continued. But it's a tactic to rattle you. She's trying to weaponize the system. I said, anger rising in my voice. She doesn't care about the kids. This is about control. Exactly, Richard agreed. But don't let it shake you. Just be ready. Show them the truth. I spent the rest of the evening preparing for the inevitable visit from CPS. I cleaned the cabin top to bottom, organized the kids' belongings, and documented every detail of our daily routines. A mix of anger and resolve burned in me as I worked. Anger at Marissa's calculated cruelty and resolve to prove her wrong. Before bed, I sat with Frank and Clara, reading their favorite book and tucking them in. As I kissed Clara's forehead, she looked up at me, her voice soft. Daddy, are you okay? I forced a smile, brushing her curls back. I'm fine, sweetheart. Don't worry about me. You seem sad, she said, her eyes searching mine. I swallowed hard, my chest tightening. I'm just thinking about how much I love you, and your brother, I said, forcing the words out. That's all. She smiled, satisfied with the answer, and closed her eyes. I sat there for a long moment, watching them sleep, drawing strength from their peaceful faces. Late that night, as the cabin settled into silence, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the growing file of evidence on my laptop. Marissa and Logan were escalating, their desperation driving them to more extreme measures. But I wasn't afraid. If they wanted to fight, I was ready. This wasn't just about winning anymore. It was about standing firm, proving to my kids and to myself that I could protect them. Marissa had underestimated me once. She wouldn't make that mistake again. Tomorrow, I would be ready. The following days blurred into a tense rhythm of preparation and vigilance. I woke early each morning, making breakfast for the kids, documenting our routines, and ensuring the cabin was spotless. Every decision felt critical, every moment an opportunity to prove that I was the stable, loving parent Marissa had failed to be. Then came the knock on the door. It was mid-afternoon, the kids were playing on the porch, and I was inside organizing paperwork when the sound echoed through the cabin. My chest tightened as I opened the door to find a woman in her 40s, dressed professionally, with a calm but unreadable expression. Mr. Reed? She asked, holding up a badge. I'm Vanessa Holmes from Child Protective Services. I'm here to follow up on a report. Her words were even, but I could sense the underlying purpose. Marissa's accusations had brought her here, and now it was up to me to prove them wrong. Of course, I said, stepping aside. Come in. Vanessa's inspection was thorough but fair. She took notes as she examined the cabin, asking about sleeping arrangements, meals, and daily routines. She spoke briefly with Frank and Clara, her demeanor warm and approachable, which put them at ease. "Do you like staying here?" she asked Frank, crouching to meet his gaze. He nodded. "Yeah, Dad takes us fishing and makes pancakes. It's fun." "What about your mom?" she asked gently. "Do you miss her?" Frank hesitated, glancing at me before answering. "I guess. But it's nice here. Dad's always with us." Vanessa noted his response, her expression giving nothing away. When she finished, she turned back to me. "Mr. Reed, everything appears to be in order," she said. "The living conditions are suitable, and the children seem happy and well cared for. I'll file my report accordingly." Relief washed over me, though I kept my composure. "Thank you," I said. "I appreciate your time." As Vanessa left, I watched her car disappear down the long dirt road, feeling the first cracks in the wall of tension I'd been carrying. Marissa's attempt to weaponize the system had failed, but I knew this was far from over. That evening, Richard called with another update. "Logan's starting to crack," he said. Emma confronted him after learning about the CPS report. "She's furious, and she's willing to go public if it means taking him down." "She's brave," I said. "And she's going to be key to this," Richard added. "There's more. Logan's been seen visiting Marissa's lawyer multiple times this week. I think they're planning something big." "They can plan all they want," I said, my voice hardening. "I'm ready." The next morning, I met with Evelyn to finalize our case for the upcoming custody hearing. We reviewed every piece of evidence, photos, financial records, recordings, and crafted a strategy to dismantle Marissa's claims. "The key is framing this as what's best for the children," Evelyn said. "The court doesn't care about revenge or anger. They care about stability, safety, and love. And that's what I've given them," I said. "That's all I've ever wanted to give them." Evelyn nodded. "Exactly. Stay focused on that, and we'll win." The day of the final custody hearing arrived, heavy with tension. I sat in the courtroom beside Evelyn, my heart pounding as Marissa entered with her attorney. Her expression was cold, defiant, but I could see the flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. The proceedings were intense. Marissa's lawyer tried to paint me as impulsive and unfit, but Evelyn countered with precision, presenting our evidence methodically and effectively. The recordings of Marissa and Logan's conversations were damning, exposing their deceit and calculated plans. But the most powerful moment came when Emma took the stand. She testified about Logan's betrayal, his manipulation, and his role in Marissa's schemes. Her words were calm but devastating, cutting through Marissa's facade like a blade. When the judge finally spoke, the tension in the room was palpable. After reviewing the evidence and considering the testimony presented, the judge said, "It is clear that Mr. Reed has demonstrated a stable and loving environment for his children. Therefore, I am awarding him full custody." The words felt like a weight lifting off my chest. I glanced at Evelyn, who gave me a small nod of satisfaction. Across the room, Marissa sat frozen, her face a mask of disbelief. After the hearing, Marissa approached me in the hallway, her voice low and bitter. "You've won for now, Lucas. But this isn't over." I met her gaze, my voice steady. "It is for the kids. They deserve better than this." She stared at me for a moment before turning and walking away, her heels clicking against the tiled floor. I watched her go, knowing I'd done everything I could to protect Frank and Clara. That evening, back at the cabin, I sat on the porch with the kids, watching the sunset over the trees. Frank leaned against my shoulder, while Clara curled up in my lap. Their presence, their warmth, was the only validation I needed. "Are we going to stay here forever?" Clara asked softly. I smiled, kissing the top of her head. "We'll stay as long as we need to, sweetheart." As the sky turned to twilight, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in months. The fight was over, but the healing had just begun. Marissa's betrayal had nearly destroyed me, but it had also shown me the depth of my own strength, the lengths I would go to for the people I loved. This wasn't just an ending. It was a new beginning. And as I held my children close, I knew we would face it together. If you enjoyed the story, please like and subscribe to the channel.